Uh, just a quick thought that I had about names. Try to bring it out, I guess. Um, First, let's start from a more general notion on why do we name things? What is the usage of name, of giving a name to things? Or even before, what is the origin? Or who give a name things? Technically, it's humans that give name to things. We don't see animals that have a naming convention in the manner that humans have. That is, the symbol is stay over time in cohesive manner, more or less. What does and in what does name refer to then? Broadly, names refer to certain phenomena that we see and we want to communicate about them. So, for example, let's take something simple, such as it is cold. To say we use the name cold for a particular experience we feel in the body, namely the chilling effect of having a temperature change or whatever you explain scientifically. But the name itself doesn't refer to the scientific notion that happened or the analysis. It refers to the mere experience of such thing. So, coldness may it be. Note here that it's not some platonic form in the regard that it is abstract. These things are names are given to concrete things generally. When they give to theoretical entities, it is an odd thing that happened, but it's not against the. But even the more general things that some people would consider platonic forms or ideals also derive from such experiences in such regard. But we need to notice something else. We name things to communicate about them. So naming is a political act in itself. By naming coldness rather than than let it stay in this unexplainable experience, we are setting boundaries that need to be acknowledged publicly in the interaction between other humans. So to name things generally is to create a political boundaries of experiences. And even more so, it's not that we merely give name things and it is just the experience. The symbol itself is a tool, and an imperfect tool at that. It's it's imperfect for that when we give the name, we are change we are adding it in categories that weren't in the experience before. For example, we say and I don't want to stick to coldness um, or passionate thing. Let's say we talk about books, the concept book, not particular book, but the category books. We can refer in giving it name. We give the particular manner of actions that humans do, namely writing in the public sphere and publishing it, a category of its own. Book is understood as book because it's something that is public to some extent. Even if it is a private writing, the mere fact it is written means that it's outside the world. But in saying that book is this sort of human activity, we create a particular formulation about what does it mean to create a book, and what does it mean to say that this being is a book. This particular formulation is not as concrete as we think about it. For example, one could come and say, if he is fairly modern-minded and after the press revolution, book is the medium itself. It's not the actions that lead to it. Of course, he would have incomplete explanation of what does it mean that book exists. But he would say, nonetheless, that he would identify in the same label something else, meaning he put in it or characterized it by different categories than what we thought about when we first formulated the term book. But when we notice, the symbol remains the same. So what gives about that? In that perhaps in that example, it's rather simple to reconcile. There is different categories that he take. The particular person refer to the particular books, or to the bodily reflection of such book, and not necessarily to its genealogy or other elements that happen to its encompass, like it's a luxurious book or it's book aimed at everyone. It's different category. We have different categories of book. More so, he think about booking fairly narrow-minded, also physically, because of that. That is, we have possibility of book not to be in as a codex, which presumably the Strawman have in mind. We can have concept of book as a scroll. Indeed, that's how you refer to it in Latin, liber, meaning wood or something like that, which is how you, from what you create paper, or something akin to that if I recall. But regardless, it is used both to book, both to letters, and both to small books. Also, it's not. Although to small books, you would change the form a bit from one usage to another. Like small book, you would say it's a book. It's a bookie in English, like. But regardless, it is that. So in that the meaning using terms to describe a particular phenomena, we lock them to a particular boundary. In Hebrew, that's what it means, to define things. To define things derived from to set a wall around, or set walls around something. Lagdir. It's derived from forgot the word in English now. It's not walls that are meant to protect. It's the notion is, when you say it in Hebrew, then it's that you give boundaries to the things, and the boundaries are not just conceptual in the object itself, but political. That is, they define a discourse of thought. They define a category that would come into a knot. Like if you refer to, you don't necessarily need to refer to book. You can use the term writing, and writing is more all-encompassing. It would also include all the practices of consuming books, like in the Middle Ages, where you had a manuscript and each writing had its own character and you could edit it and play with it. There was no authorship. It was still a book. It was still a sense of writing. But by calling it a book and focus it around a particular material form that it takes, we give credence to it being something that it could be otherwise, meaning the action or a particular form of communication. This illustration is more to show what comes into names, and it's not necessary to show to give an all-encompassing definition. The example is rather uninteresting in itself. But now let's move from that to what does it mean to say that giving a name is a political act. Or I now may switch the language, it's a violent act to the world. It's act that you transgress in some manner and say to the world what it need to be. You say to the, not in the sense that you change the world in any manner, but you change the whole framing of the outlook on the world, and as such you change how the world is perceived. And it's not only change to you, as noted, it's change in the public sphere, or who is open to the discussion, to the term. So in that, you create a category in giving the name. But let's look beyond give. But let's see after we give name. That is what we do when we give name. After we give name, what happened to the proper name, whatever it may be, is that it gets life of its own in the world. That is to say, because it's a political concept, not political, again, not in the sense of Trump said X or each such legislator said, said a law such and such, but political in the sense that it is of human, it shaped the way of human interacting with each other and create a sort of hierarchy within it, or a power relations that to each participant have. Now, given that it's after the name is out there, it's open to change essentially, and that way labels are less important in philosophical discussion, but what people usually try to refer to what being described rather than what that label we would use. Like, it's less of an interesting to say that in the scholastic period people refer to the imaginative imagination to what we call today concrete, and what we call concrete they refer to in what we call imagination they refer to as concrete. It is less of an interesting distinction other than we point out that there is different symbolize, different reference to what being spoken about. It is important that we do so when we try to understand the argument. Or, for example, that they took will to be a faculty before the um, before the soul decide, but there is the faculty of the will which direct the soul, in a sense. At least in some scholastic formulation. Scholastic is not a coherent terms; it's a cohesive group of thought. To return to that point, it is when it's given life, it's also in the public sphere, and not just that. It creates different connections that weren't that are not necessarily intended to. This connection created because giving names by humans is in time. And in time, things happen and there is a constant change between each context of usage, or each context and each that lead to that give different background to the experience. Interesting to note, for example, the term vita activa by the humanist was in negation to vita contemplativa. That is, they refer to they took vita contemplativa to be something or the life of contemplation, which is the sort of monasterian practice or Dominican practice of thinking to yourself. What we call today theology, in a sense. Though not the same practice today. Not that to say. They took vita activa to be negation of it. But in doing so, it never remained just in that, because what making something contemplative is not necessarily the same remained. For example, Kepler changed vita activa. Not if before it was to do the political acts and study the classics to enrich the political life of one person, conceptions of the world. Kepler took vita activa. He used the term, used the notion at least, but it somewhat transformed to the practice of the new science. That is, it is active because it's an active usage of the senses in some manner. Not exact thing, but I mean, you can see a transformation of the vita activa from a political concept of we need to be a good rulers and live the good earthly life, not because it is not because we are religious, but because that's the most we can do. In that regard, it's not. It was the motivation for such thinking was deeply theological, deeply Christian in the conception, and tragic at that. It's not. It wasn't taken to be something positive. It's taken as a human condition that they are to live in time, and as such, to live through the trifles of everyday life, that is our life among others. And that's what we focus upon, and that's what they decided to focus upon as such. But in Kepler case, it's become more around the usage of senses and understanding the world as is. Meaning that before that the term still existed, but what it referred to in its time was different. it was no longer a satisfactory answer to go to the classics. That, and it's not that you were disillusioned about understanding the world as physics, not as the nomos. You could understand the physics and by that enrich the human life. It was connected to creating utilities to some extent, but not necessarily just to utilities. It led to, in the most stoic sense, to understand what the thing is, and by that you can direct yourself. Um, direct yourself as you understand what is necessary, what is possible, what is what necessary, if I call it necessary, possible, and indifferent. Like that things, it's something that I can choose from, but it would be necessarily beneficial or not, and is it forced upon me or not? So it's a manner that you can direct ethics, but not in the same sense. Um, they will also lead to different politics and so on. But notice what did happen there. The term humanist itself changed in the change of time. It got different connotation. Both it's got an old connotation and a new one. And they're both on top of each other and competing. They are competing on what is more direct, but they are cohesive, meaning that they are not negating each other as they derive from answers to the same questions. That is, what can we do in the good to achieve in this life, given that there is no hope. As I said, it's really tragic story that they thought about. It's not. It wasn't something that you are getting freed from religion or things like that. It was more a tragic story on how human folly is thrust upon you, is thrust upon us in inescapable manner. Um, right? So that in terms of changes throughout time, but there are other changes that happen when it is in the open. This will be seen more directly in political categories, that the in the sense of Trump legislating something stupid somewhere. Um, it's some Trump guy, I don't know. It doesn't matter. When you give a label, for example, to a political movement or a certain practice, is because it is in a social context, given a particular relation to one political party than another, it's not something that was before, but it became there as a matter of being, as the term, floating in the social sphere. Floating in terms of usage, not in. I try to. It seems like this word usage is a bit seems abstract, but I treat it as more concrete things. It's a bit. I guess I would try to clarify when it seems unclear. But as the word floated in the world, as it was being spoken about and by people, it got a relation to a political party. This relation is not part of the concept per se, but it's part of how the concept perceived. So, to give it the name, in a way, is to give life to an entire web of connections that, that form about it just by the mere usage and the fact that it's in time. Now, the point here is more to think about what does it mean that we give name. Of course, it's a human practice and a necessary human practice. If we didn't have names for the experiences and our human activities that we have, it wouldn't we couldn't really function, not as a person and not as a society. As as person is always in relation to other, regardless if it is whatever public debate right now about is it individual or not. Individual exists within context. All so even if it is exists within context, but as a private being, it's never just a private being. You can have, for example, the relation of ignorance toward others. That relation is not a negative relation, it's a positive relation. You say you don't care about them. Beforehand, choose not to care about them in that sense. And I guess the question that led me here is more what does we give name to, or what does names, or why should we give name to particular things should be a guiding question in our life. Whatever names, it seems that in certain contexts, giving names would be harmful to what we try to achieve, regardless if you realist or not. Don't care much about these scholastic debates, uh, but at least in the matter that it seems that giving name can have so, can cause harm, even if it's just and it's never remained theoretical in its how it works, how it be in the how it function in the world. It's might something that might bother me lately, but I mean, I guess that that's the sort of notion that I was thinking about um, on it. It's not a complete thought by any means, so be happy of dialogue or something like that. Bye, I guess.